One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Those immortal words, spoken from this dusty alien surface, millions of miles away, they're just seared into our collective consciousness.
Absolutely. They evoke such a profound sense of wonder, a real testament to what humanity can achieve when we dare to dream beyond Earth.
For so many people, it's the definitive symbol, our ingenuity, our courage. But for an enduring segment of the population, that monumental achievement, it isn't a triumph at all.
No.
It's seen as this meticulously crafted illusion, a dazzling act of deception pulled off on a global stage.
It's truly one of history's most profound and frankly inspiring moments. Yet, like you said, it's also the subject of this incredibly persistent, decades-long claim of elaborate deception.
Yeah, it's wild.
On one side, you have the official narrative, unparalleled feat of human ingenuity, scientific advancement, and on the other side, this stubborn, unwavering belief that it was all faked.
And that's precisely what we're going to dive into today. The Apollo moon landings of the 1960s and 70s. We're going to explore this as a dual narrative. The indisputable scientific and engineering achievement versus the unwavering, often really emotionally charged belief in an elaborate hoax.
Our mission in this deep dive really is to equip you with the facts, the arguments, and the various perspectives from both sides of this debate.
Right.
We'll meticulously unpack the historical accounts, delve into the various conspiracy theories that are out there, and then present the scientific rebuttals, and crucially, the truly extensive independent verifications.
Yeah, the goal isn't to tell you what to believe. Not at all.
No.
It's to lay out the evidence as impartially and thoroughly as we possibly can, empowering you to weigh the facts and, draw your own conclusions.
We've poured through a pretty comprehensive stack of sources for this deep dive. Articles from scientific journals, historical analyses, primary source documents.
And even the arguments put forth by the skeptics themselves. We looked at those too.
Absolutely. We're going to act as your expert guides, navigating the complexities, shining a light on some perhaps surprising facts.
So let's unpack this. Was it real? Or was it the most convincing show ever staged?
Okay.
To really understand the Apollo program, our journey begins not on the moon, actually, but right here on Earth, in the intense geopolitical landscape of the Cold War.
That's so crucial.
Yeah, this context is absolutely vital for grasping both the monumental achievement and the seeds of doubt that would later be sown.
You're absolutely right. The genesis of Apollo wasn't purely scientific ambition. It was deeply, inextricably rooted in the ideological struggle. The U.S. versus the Soviet Union.
A high-stakes global chess match.
Exactly. And space became the ultimate arena, the place to demonstrate technological, economic, political superiority.
So May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy stands before Congress. He'd only been in office a few months.
Right. And he declares this incredibly ambitious national aspiration to land a human on the moon and safely return them to Earth.
Before this decade is out. That deadline was key.
It really was. And it wasn't just a challenge. It was, like you said, a gauntlet thrown down. A direct, bold response to the Soviet Union's early successes in the space race, which were stunning at the time.
Yeah, think about it. They'd launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, back in '57. Then, April '61, Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human in space.
America felt genuinely behind. Panic might not be too strong a word in some circles.
So Kennedy's mandate was strategic. This wasn't just about exploring space for the sake of it.
Not primarily, no. It was a desperate race for prestige, a critical demonstration of American technological superiority, global leadership. The stakes for the United States just couldn't have been higher.
Winning the moon race would signify America's dominance, prove its system was superior.
And this immense national impetus provided an almost unthinkable drive for a genuine lunar landing. The resources, the brain power, it was all mobilized.
But this is where that initial tension point emerges, right? The very foundation for many hoax claims.
Exactly.
Because while this extraordinary pressure pushed NASA to achieve what seemed impossible,
which it absolutely did,
hoax proponents twist this very same context. They argue that this immense pressure to win the space race, combined with how incredibly difficult the task was, it would have necessitated deception if an actual successful landing was deemed unachievable.
That's a crucial insight into how conspiracy theories often operate. They take a universally acknowledged fact, the Cold War pressure was real, no one denies that, and they interpret it through this entirely different, cynical lens.
Right. The pressure could lead to incredible achievement, or it could lead to faking it.
Understanding that dual interpretation, How the same facts can lead to such vastly different conclusions is vital for grasping why these claims took root and why they still resonate with some people today.
Okay, so with that geopolitical chessboard set, let's zoom in on the mission that really captured the world's imagination, Apollo 11. It wasn't just a single event, was it? It was this monumental feat of coordination and, importantly, unprecedented public visibility. A genuine spectacle.
It truly was. The primary objective, as we mentioned, fulfilling JFK's mandate. Crewed lunar landing, safe return. But Apollo 11 was the culmination of years of work. It was part of the broader Apollo program, which officially ran from 1961 to 1972.
And that program ultimately saw 12 individuals, all American astronauts, walk on the moon, across 6 successful landings.
Think about that for a moment. 6 successful, distinct missions over just about 3 years, each with its own specific objectives, its own challenges, not just a one-off stunt.
And Apollo 11 itself, the big one, launched July 16, 1969.
Propelled skyward by the colossal Saturn V rocket from Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
I mean, we're talking about a vehicle so immense,
Yeah.
taller than the Statue of Liberty, visible for miles. You could feel the rumble far away.
Its sheer size and power were just a testament to the engineering challenge they overcame. The crew, Apollo 11, consisted of 3 extraordinary individuals.
Commander Neil Armstrong, who'd be the first to step onto the moon.
Lunar Module pilot Edwin Buzz Aldrin Jr., the second to walk on the surface.
And Command Module pilot Michael Collins, who had the arguably lonely job of skillfully orbiting the moon alone in the command service module while his crewmates were down below.
A critical role, though. The ride home depended on him.
Absolutely. So the lunar module, famously named Eagle, touched down in the Sea of Tranquility on July 20th, 1969.
Armstrong and Aldrin spent approximately 22 hours on the surface, conducting experiments, collecting those crucial samples.
Then they rejoined Collins in orbit for the journey back. The whole mission wrapped up July 24th, 1969. Successful splashdown in the Pacific. Massive recovery effort.
What's really compelling here, especially when you consider the feasibility of a hoax, is the sheer scale and the public nature of the Apollo program right from the start.
Kennedy framed it that way.
He did, as a transparent national goal for all to witness. This wasn't some clandestine black project hidden away. Over 400,000 scientists, engineers, technicians, support staff directly involved in the Apollo program, across dozens of contractors, universities.
400,000, that's a staggering number.
It is.
So you're suggesting that this immense human coordination and the program's inherent transparency, it directly challenges the feasibility of a covert hoax.
How could it not?
The idea that it was faked in a studio, it just defies logistical reality and maybe even basic human behavior.
Precisely. Imagine trying to orchestrate such an elaborate deception involving literally hundreds of thousands of people. Think about it. Engineers designing rocket stages, technicians assembling components, scientists analyzing telemetry data, flight controllers in Houston, thousands of security personnel, even the families of everyone involved.
Someone would talk.
The sheer number of individuals with even partial knowledge design, manufacturing, mission control would make a secret operation of this magnitude virtually impossible to keep under wraps for, over 50 years now?
Yeah, the odds seem incredibly low.
Human nature itself. Whistleblowing, gossip, simple mistakes. It would almost guarantee exposure, keeping a secret of this scale. Arguably harder than actually going to the moon.
That's a powerful point. Often gets overlooked in the, heat of the conspiracy claims.
Yeah.
And beyond the logistical impossibility of a hoax, the actual scientific achievements, the enduring discoveries from Apollo, they're incredibly compelling, tangible, verifiable evidence.
They are, and they continue to yield new insights even today, decades later. During their brief but really impactful stay on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin deployed the early Apollo Scientific Experiments Package, ESEP for short.
Right, the little science station they left behind.
Essentially, yeah. A suite of scientific instruments. It included a passive seismic experiment seismometers to detect moonquakes and meteoroid impacts, gave us unprecedented insights into the moon's interior structure, stuff we couldn't guess from Earth.
And maybe the most continuously validating piece of equipment still active up there. The Laser Ranging Retroreflector, the LRR.
Ah, yeah.
This isn't just a historical artifact. It's a mirror ray still used today, decades later. Observatories around the world bounce lasers off it.
To precisely measure the Earth-Moon distance. And the precision is remarkable, down to a few centimeters. Wow.
The data from the LRR has confirmed the moon is gradually moving away from Earth, about 3.8 centimeters a year.
That's fascinating.
It also confirms the stability of gravity, provides data for testing gravitational theories. They also collected solar wind particles for compositional analysis, an experiment designed by Swiss scientists, actually. Clever stuff.
But for many people, the most tangible proof, the thing you can literally, point to, is the lunar samples. The moon rocks.
Absolutely.
Apollo 11 brought back 22 kilograms, about 48 pounds, of rock, soil, dust.
And across all the Apollo missions, we're talking a remarkable 842 pounds. That's 382 kilograms of lunar material returned to Earth. These aren't just rocks, they're geological treasures.
Tell a story.
They really do. Their analysis significantly strengthened the giant impact hypothesis. That's the leading scientific theory for how the moon formed.
The idea that a Mars-sized object slammed into a young Earth, exactly, billions of years ago, and the moon formed from the debris ejected into orbit. The lunar samples support this because they show specific characteristics. The moon lacks a large iron core like Earth's. Its composition is mostly like Earth's crust materials. And critically, it has identical ratios of many isotopes to Earth rocks. That points strongly to a shared origin.
So it's not just moon rocks. They paint a picture of the moon's violent geological past. Explosive impacts, flowing lava. They give us a timeline.
A timeline for estimating the ages of planetary surfaces right across our solar system. What's more, lunar rocks are distinctly identifiable. You can tell them apart from Earth rocks, even from meteorites that fall here.
How so?
They have unique geochemical traits. An absence of hydrous alteration, basically. They haven't been exposed to water-based weathering for billions of years, unlike Earth rocks, and clear evidence of impact events that could only happen on an airless body.
So you couldn't just fake them by picking up rocks in the Arizona desert?
Absolutely not. Their formation environment is unique. And crucially, these hundreds of kilograms of samples weren't just kept by NASA, hidden away in some vault.
No, they were shared. Widely.
Distributed to and analyzed by 135 different countries. Countless independent labs. Think about that. Scientists all over the world, independently confirming their lunar origin through rigorous analysis. That's a truly global validation.
Still yielding new findings today, you said.
Decades after collection, yes. Ongoing research demonstrates their authenticity and profound continuing scientific impact. Plus, as you mentioned earlier, the laser-ranging retroreflector provides continuous real-time verification of human-placed objects on the moon. Globally accessible, continuously validated evidence.
And people can see them, right? In museums.
Yes, many prominent museums, like the American Museum of Natural History, proudly displayed genuine moon rock samples for the public to see.
So this isn't just a claim of an achievement. It's verifiable, tangible, internationally corroborated evidence, continuously confirmed. Which brings us to the technological prowess, the sheer engineering brilliance of the Apollo program that made this possible in the first place.
The success was entirely predicated on groundbreaking, truly cutting-edge engineering for the time. The Saturn V rocket, for instance. It wasn't just big, it was this immense launch vehicle, a significant leap in rocketry.
363 feet tall.
Designed to lift both the Apollo Command Service module and the lunar module into space. It generated 7.5 million pounds of thrust at launch. The most powerful rocket ever successfully flown, a titan of engineering.
And the lunar module itself, the Eagle, a marvel of purpose-built design. It looked a bit weird, didn't it? Like a giant bug or some kind of tinfoil origami project.
It did look unconventional, almost fragile looking. But its shape made perfect sense because it was built only to operate in the vacuum of space. Aerodynamics, crucial for flight in an atmosphere, completely irrelevant on the moon.
Ah, right. Form follows function, even if the function is landing on the moon.
Exactly. Its design was entirely optimized for lunar conditions. Lightweight, able to work in a vacuum, landing legs designed to absorb the impact. Then you had the pressurized spacesuits, the A7L suit, for example. 21 layers of specialized fabric and insulation.
21 layers. Wow.
Incredibly sophisticated life support systems. They had water-filled tubes running through them for cooling, portable backpacks providing oxygen, regulating temperature, removing carbon dioxide, all meticulously engineered for that incredibly harsh, airless, temperature-extreme environment.
And the computing power. Primitive by today's standards, sure, but custom-built and revolutionary for the mission. The Apollo Guidance Computer, the AGC.
And the DSKY instrument panel, that keypad and display console the astronauts used.
Right. Memory comparable to a modern digital wristwatch, I read.
Yeah.
Like 2 kilobytes of RAM.
Something like that, yeah. Tiny by today's standards. But it was sufficient for the incredibly complex navigational and control tasks needed for lunar transit and landing. A real triumph of compact real-time computing in an era before microprocessors really took off.
So what this detailed description fundamentally shows is that while the tech was incredibly advanced for its time, it wasn't beyond the capabilities of the 1960s.
Exactly. The program followed a logical, incremental progression. Technological development had been building for decades. Before crewed landings, you had unmanned spacecraft. Ranger, Surveyor, lunar orbiter probes.
They had already photographed, probed, even landed on the moon.
Right, laying crucial groundwork, proving out key technologies. It wasn't like they went from zero to landing humans overnight.
So this systematic approach, from unmanned probes gathering vital data to crewed missions, it directly refutes that common conspiracy claim that the technology didn't exist to go to the moon. It shows a clear path.
It absolutely does. The fact that components like the lunar module were designed specifically to function only in a vacuum, zero consideration for atmospheric flight, that underscores meticulous, scientifically informed engineering. Engineering that would be highly improbable, unnecessarily complex, and frankly just weird to simulate for a mere theatrical production. Why bother designing for a vacuum if you're filming in a studio?
Good point.
And don't forget the critical engineering decision of Lunar Orbit Rendezvous, the LOR method. Hugely complex strategy.
Where the lander went down alone, then came back up to meet the orbiting command module.
Exactly. It was chosen because it was deemed the most financially and temporally feasible way to meet Kennedy's ambitious deadline. It proved that pragmatic, achievable solutions were central to the program's success. It wasn't some desperate last-minute gamble, but a calculated engineering choice.
Okay, so we've laid out this immense body of evidence for the authenticity of the moon landings. Geopolitical imperative, tangible scientific proof, technological marvels. It's a lot. But now, let's pivot. Let's look at the other side of the coin, the skeptics' claims. What are the core arguments they put forward to suggest it was all an elaborate hoax?
Well, a cornerstone of the moon landing conspiracy theories is the assertion that the U.S. had incredibly compelling hidden reasons to stage the missions. Proponents claim the intense pressure of the Cold War space race, specifically the humiliation of falling behind the Soviet Union.
Which was very real.
Very real. That this compelled the U.S. to fake the landings, to secure a symbolic victory, project technological superiority, even if it wasn't quite there yet.
So basically it was all about appearances, projecting an image, winning the PR war, even if it meant deception. The ends justified the means, in that view.
Exactly. It's also argued that NASA itself, facing immense pressure to meet Kennedy's deadline before this decade is out, might have fabricated the landings.
Why? To avoid national humiliation.
That's the argument. Avoid humiliation, safeguard its reputation, and crucially, ensure continued massive government funding, especially if a genuine lunar landing was deemed impossible or just too risky with 1960s technology.
And then there's the more cynical distraction theory, right?
Yeah.
That the whole spectacle served as a deliberate diversion.
Pulling public attention and resources away from the increasingly unpopular and costly Vietnam War, which was really bleeding the nation dry at the time, financially and morally.
Yes. But to fully grasp how these theories gained such incredible traction, we need to look at the timing. The mid-1970s, when they first really emerged and spread.
That context is critical. This period saw an unprecedented erosion of public trust in government institutions in the U.S.
You had the Pentagon Papers leak in '71, bombshell revelations.
Exposed systematic deception by the Johnson administration about the Vietnam War. Its true aims, its prospects. The public had been misled.
And right on its heels, Watergate, starting '72. Leading to Nixon's resignation. It just shattered public confidence in official narratives, in the integrity of the presidency itself.
It was a perfect storm for distrust. It really shifted suspicion, didn't it? From external enemies, the Soviets, to the idea that the American state itself, its own government, might be actively conspiring against its own citizens. People were primed not to trust.
Looking for reasons not to believe the official story.
That's precisely what happened. And into this fertile ground of skepticism and disillusionment comes Bill Kaysing.
Former U.S. Navy officer, technical writer for a NASA rocket manufacturer.
Right. He publishes his book in 1976, We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion Swindle. His claims of inside knowledge, his seemingly authoritative background. It resonated powerfully with a distrustful public. It provided a ready-made narrative template for the hoax theory.
And later, popular media just amplified these claims, right? Blurring the lines between fiction and perceived reality.
Definitely. I remember the 2001 Fox TV special, Conspiracy Theory, Did We Land on the Moon? That presented these ideas to a huge audience, treated them fairly seriously.
And even before that, the 1978 Hollywood film Capricorn 1, which depicted a faked Mars landing, but it inadvertently planted that seed of possibility in many minds if they could fake Mars.
They did. These examples vividly show how geopolitical anxieties, deep-seated societal distrust, how they can be weaponized, really, to fuel these narratives. They tap into a ready audience, eager for alternative explanations, especially when official narratives feel untrustworthy.
Okay, let's get into the specific visual proof that skeptics often point to. These are the alleged photographic and video anomalies. And on the surface, some of them seem incredibly compelling. They're often the most accessible gotchas for people.
They frequently are, because they rely on that deeply ingrained seeing is believing mindset, but often it's based on a superficial interpretation of what you're actually seeing. One of the most common ones, the waving flag.
Right. Skeptics argue the American flag planted on the moon looks like it's flapping or rippling in photos and videos, which they say is impossible in a vacuum. No wind.
Then there's the absence of stars argument. Critics say a clear lunar sky, no atmosphere. It should show a dazzling array of stars, maybe even brighter than from Earth.
So their omission from the photos suggests a staged environment, like they couldn't replicate a realistic star field in the studio.
That's the claim. Inconsistent shadows are another common point. Some shadows in the photos appear non-parallel, or they seem to converge in weird ways.
Interpreted as evidence of multiple artificial lights, like studio lighting, not a single distant sun.
Exactly. And the calibration crosshairs, those little plus marks etched on the camera lens for scale, sometimes they appear behind objects in the photos, which leads critics to suggest elements were pasted onto a background. Photo manipulation.
And who could forget the famous C rock?
Yeah.
That alleged sighting of a distinct letter C on a lunar rock in one photo.
Interpreted by some as a telltale studio prop label accidentally caught on camera.
Plus the classic question, who filmed Armstrong's first step? Given he was demonstrably the first one out of the lunar module, how was that filmed from the outside?
These are all widely circulated claims, propagated through books, documentaries, the internet, and then there's the popular, though entirely fictionalized, theory about Stanley Kubrick.
Ah, yes. The director of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Groundbreaking realism, amazing special effects for its time.
The theory is that he was secretly hired by NASA to fake the moon landing footage. It gained surprising traction, even though it clearly originated in satire in a mockumentary.
It's amazing how a fictional idea, even from a mockumentary, can embed itself in public consciousness like that.
It is, and then you have claims about the implausibly high quality of the photos for the era, or seeing identical backgrounds in photos supposedly taken miles apart, suggesting a repetitive painted backdrop on a set.
These visual gotchas are really what draw many people into the rabbit hole, aren't they? They seem so obvious at first glance.
The persistence of these visual claims, despite clear scientific explanations, which we'll get into, really highlights the role of confirmation bias.
Explain that.
People tend to selectively seek out, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms what they already believe. While easily disregarding contradictory evidence, these anomalies provide easily digestible proof for those already inclined to doubt.
Okay. Beyond the visual evidence, skeptics also raise seemingly logical concerns about environmental and mechanical impossibilities, basically claiming 1960s tech just couldn't have handled the moon's extreme conditions, or the physics wouldn't allow it.
This is a significant category of claims, taps into common sense assumptions about how things work here on Earth. A key argument is radiation. Astronauts couldn't have survived lethal exposure from the Van Allen radiation belts and galactic cosmic rays during their trip to the moon.
And related to that, the camera film. It would have been hopelessly fogged by radiation, or maybe even melted by the extreme daytime heat on the moon. Gets up to 240 Fahrenheit on 120 Celsius.
Right, and the lunar module's landing itself is a big target. Conspiracy theorists insist the LM, with its powerful engine, should have left a huge blast crater, or kicked up way more dust.
And neither of those is obvious in the photos, implying no actual landing happened.
And following that logic, the absence of a visible exhaust flame from the LM's engines during landing or takeoff is presented as proof. Most rockets on Earth have a fiery plume, right, Har?
You do.
Also, the footprints. They look unexpectedly well preserved in the lunar dust. Skeptics question how that's possible without moisture to bind the dust together, like wet sand.
Other claims, too, like the spacesuit air conditioning couldn't possibly work in a vacuum. How do you get rid of heat without air to transfer it to?
Or the assertion that the Apollo 16 crew couldn't have survived a massive solar flare that supposedly happened during their flight.
So what's the pattern here? It sounds like applying Earth-based logic to a totally alien environment.
That's a prevalent pattern, exactly. The expectation of a big blast crater, how the flag should behave. These are perfectly explicable when you consider the lack of atmosphere and the specific design of the LM's engine.
And the radiation concerns. Film integrity.
Those are dispelled when you understand the spacecraft's shielding, its exact trajectory through the belts, and the principles of heat transfer in a vacuum, which works differently than in air. These impossibilities, cited by hoax proponents, they are, in fact, entirely consistent with known scientific principles, just applied to the unique conditions of space and the moon.
Makes sense. Finally, some theories focus on alleged irregularities with the mission's data and communication, hinting at a deliberate cover-up, manipulation of information.
These claims often play on a natural skepticism towards official narratives, especially when things aren't perfectly transparent or seem a bit odd. For instance, the claim about the communication delay. The round-trip time between Earth and Moon for radio signals should be over 2 seconds.
Right, you'd expect a noticeable lag in conversations.
Skeptics argue that delay wasn't consistently apparent in the live broadcasts, suggesting edited or maybe even pre-recorded footage designed to mask the true distance, make it seem like it wasn't live from the moon.
Yes. And allegations persist about missing original Apollo 11 tapes, the high-quality telemetry data, the pristine video recordings.
Implying a deliberate cover-up to hide incriminating evidence, perhaps.
That's the idea. Furthermore, the claim about Australia's Parkes Observatory, a key receiving station for the Apollo 11 moonwalk.
What about it?
The claim is they were told to stand down or had sudden technical difficulties just before the moonwalk, suggesting manipulation of broadcast sources, maybe, to ensure only NASA's supposed faked feed was distributed globally.
These claims, while often based on misinterpretations or incomplete information, tap directly into that public distrust we talked about, the idea of official secrecy. Even genuine, explainable gaps in information or just normal historical practices can be twisted to suggest malicious intent. It's leveraging that pre-existing distrust.
Okay, so we've laid out the skeptics' arguments, the visual anomalies, the perceived impossibilities, the communication discrepancies. Now let's bring in the science, the cold, hard facts, and maybe most importantly, the overwhelming independent verification. How do these claims actually hold up under rigorous scrutiny?
They are systematically, almost universally addressed and debunked by scientific explanations, empirical evidence, and, like you said, an incredible volume of independent confirmations from multiple international sources. Let's start by directly tackling those photographic and video anomalies you mentioned, because they're often the entry point for many skeptics.
The famous waving flag. Seems so obvious. No wind, flag waves. How does that hold up scientifically?
The flag's appearance is entirely due to its specialized design for a vacuum. It wasn't just a flag on a regular pole.
Mm-hmm.
It had a horizontal telescopic rod extended along the top edge, specifically designed to hold it unfurled, to prevent it from just hanging limply, which it would in no atmosphere.
Okay, so it was meant to look unfurled. What about the ripples?
The rippled look came from being folded tightly during storage in the spacecraft. When the astronauts deployed it, they had trouble extending that telescopic rod completely. So it didn't pull the flag totally taut, leaving permanent wrinkles which look like ripples caused by wind.
So the ripples were built in, essentially, from being folded.
Pretty much. Any observed movement was solely from the astronauts planting it or adjusting it. In a vacuum without air resistance, it would vibrate briefly from being handled, then remain perfectly, utterly still. It doesn't wave due to wind, because there is no wind.
I think Mythbusters tackled that one, didn't they?
They did. Famously and explicitly debunked it by recreating the conditions in a vacuum chamber.
Okay. What about the absence of stars? That's a big one for many people. Implies a fake set?
It's a very simple concept in photography, really, especially with 1960s cameras. The moon's surface during the daytime is brilliantly lit by the sun, far brighter than most scenes you'd photograph on Earth. Think desert at high noon, blazing sunlight.
Right. Very bright.
The astronauts' cameras were deliberately set for very fast shutter speeds and small apertures, like squinting your eye to let in less light. This was to properly expose that brightly lit foreground. The lunar landscape, the LM, the astronauts themselves in their white suits.
Makes sense. You don't want to overexpose the main subject.
Exactly. But that setting, while perfect for the bright foreground, makes faint, distant objects like stars far too dim to register on the film. Just like you can't see stars in a bright daytime photo here on Earth. Your camera exposes for the bright sky or ground, not the faint stars.
But were stars ever photographed from the moon?
Yes. Crucially, long exposure photos taken from the moon by other instruments, specifically designed for astronomy, like Apollo 16's far ultraviolet camera, they do indeed show stars, just not the snapshots taken during moonwalks.
Okay, that addresses that. What about those inconsistent shadows, looking non-parallel, converging, suggesting studio lights?
Shadows on the moon are actually more complex than you might think. It's not just one single light source, technically.
How so?
Yeah.
The sun is the main one, right?
Yeah. The sun is the primary illuminator, absolutely. But there are other significant light sources contributing. Sunlight reflected from the brilliant Earth, which appears as a huge, bright disk in the lunar sky. Light reflected from the highly reflective lunar surface itself. Light bouncing off the lunar module, off the astronauts' white suits.
So lots of reflected light bouncing around.
Exactly. Plus, the moon's terrain is very uneven. Craters, undulations. This plays tricks with perspective. It can make shadows appear non-parallel or converging, even if the primary light source is parallel sunlight. Furthermore, the wide-angle lenses used on the Hasselblad cameras can distort perspective, making parallel lines appear to bend or converge, especially near the edges of the frame. This optical effect is common on Earth, too. Think of photos of tall buildings or long roads.
Mythbusters looked at this one, too, I think.
They did. Demonstrated how uneven terrain and perspective easily create seemingly non-parallel shadows from a single light source.
Okay, then the big one for the landing itself. The no blast crater or no significant dust scatter directly under the LM. Skeptics say this means it never really landed.
Right. A large, deep blast crater was never actually expected by the engineers. The lunar module's descent engine, while powerful initially, was specifically designed to be throttled down significantly during the final landing phase.
How much thrust are we talking at touchdown?
Reduce its thrust to only about 1.5 pounds per square inch, size I, very low pressure, spread over a wide area.
And why does that matter?
In a vacuum, rocket exhaust gases expand very, very quickly sideways as soon as they leave the nozzle. They spread out widely, reducing the localized pressure on the surface, unlike in an atmosphere where air pressure contains the exhaust into a more focused plume.
So the exhaust spread out too much to dig a deep hole.
Pretty much. While no deep crater formed, 16mm movies taken from the LM window during landing clearly show fine surface dust being scattered outwards, in that classic parabolic arc you see in a vacuum. And photos taken after landing show scouring patterns on the surface under the engine bell.
And the soil itself.
The lunar regolith, the moon soil, is incredibly compact below the top few inches. It's been bombarded by micrometeoroids for billions of years, packing it down hard. It's not like loose sand all the way down. Measurements showed only a small erosion, maybe 4 to 6 inches deep, under the Apollo 11 lander.
Okay. And the lack of a visible exhaust flame, that seems counterintuitive for a rocket.
It does if you're thinking about, say, the space shuttle launch. But the lunar modules use different fuel, hypergolic propellants.
What's special about those?
They ignite spontaneously on contact with each other, no ignition system needed, and crucially, they produce a nearly transparent exhaust, mostly invisible gases.
Ah, so not a bright, fiery plume like kerosene or hydrogen rockets.
Exactly. Unlike the bright, fiery plumes we see from many rockets on Earth, these gases are mostly non-luminous. And in the vacuum of space, as we said, these exhaust plumes spread out very quickly and diffusely, making them even harder to see, virtually impossible to photograph clearly.
Okay, physics explains the missing flame. But what about those footprints? So sharp, so well preserved in the dust. Supposedly too perfect without moisture to bind them.
Lunar dust, or regolith, is fundamentally different from Earth dust. That's the key. It's unweathered by wind and water.
So the particles are different.
Very different. Unlike the rounded, smooth particles of Earth dust, lunar dust particles are incredibly sharp, angular, almost like microscopic shards of glass, because they've never been eroded by weather.
And how does that help footprints?
In a vacuum, these sharp, Irregular particles interlock and stick together through electrostatic forces and mechanical interlocking. They create a surprising cohesion, allows the dust to hold its shape remarkably well, almost like talcum powder or damp sand, even though it's perfectly dry.
So the very nature of the dust makes it hold shapes well.
Exactly. This unique property explains their unexpected preservation without any moisture. And yes, this claim too was definitively debunked on Mythbusters. They showed how fine, sharp dust behaves in a vacuum.
All right, let's tackle the radiation claims. The idea astronauts couldn't have survived the Van Allen belts, or camera film would be fogged or melted.
The Apollo spacecraft traversed the Van Allen radiation belts relatively quickly, just minutes for the inner, more intense belt, and about 1.5 hours for the outer, less intense belt.
And they were shielded.
Yes, significantly. Shielded from the ionizing radiation, the harmful kind, by the dense aluminum hulls of the spacecraft. Plus, the mission trajectory was specifically chosen. They navigated through the thinnest parts of the belts to minimize the total radiation dose.
Did anyone calculate the actual dose they received?
Yes. And Dr. James Van Allen herself, the scientist who discovered the belts, publicly rebutted the claims that the radiation levels were too dangerous. He stated the dosage was manageable. The total dose received by the astronauts was comparable to the annual limits set for workers in the nuclear energy field, well within safe parameters for a short mission.
And the camera film?
Similarly protected, kept inside robust metal containers designed to block radiation. As for melting from heat, the cameras and film magazines were designed with reflective coatings and insulation to handle the temperature extremes. Heat transfer in a vacuum primarily happens through radiation, not convection, so they could manage it.
What about that solar flare claim during Apollo 16?
It's crucial to note, no large, dangerous solar flare actually occurred during Apollo 16's flight. That's a persistent but incorrect claim, so that specific radiation threat simply wasn't there.
And if anyone still doubts the very existence of a vacuum on the moon, there's that live demonstration, right? The hammer and feather drop.
Absolutely. Irrefutable. During Apollo 15, astronaut David Scott performed it live on TV. Stood on the moon, held out a geological hammer in one hand, a falcon feather in the other, dropped them simultaneously. On Earth, obviously, the feather would float down slowly due to air resistance. The hammer would plummet.
But on the moon?
In the absence of air, both objects fell at the exact same rate. Hit the lunar surface at precisely the same time. A perfect, elegant, live demonstration of Galilean physics in a vacuum. Unequivocal proof.
What's truly fascinating here, when you lay it all out, is that these apparent anomalies, the things that seem to undermine the landings, they're actually entirely consistent with known physics, just physics operating in a vacuum under low gravity.
Exactly. They aren't evidence of a hoax at all. They are, in fact, compelling evidence of a successful mission navigating the unique, challenging conditions of an alien environment. It really requires a bit of scientific literacy, a willingness to understand a different context to see that.
Which brings us to maybe the most compelling, unassailable category of evidence, the independent third-party confirmations. This isn't just NASA saying, trust us. This is external verifiable proof from multiple sources all around the globe.
This is where the hoax theory really starts to crumble under the weight of evidence, because it makes a large-scale, long-term hoax virtually impossible to sustain.
Okay, let's start with the pictures from orbit. Lunar orbiter imagery.
Since 2009, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, has been orbiting the moon. Low altitude, capturing incredibly high-definition photos.
And what do they show?
They clearly show the lunar module descent stages, the bottom halves left behind, the scientific equipment deployed, like the ALSEP stations, and even the faint tracks left by the astronauts' boots and the lunar rovers at all 6 Apollo landing sites. You can literally see the hardware and the footprints from orbit today.
But that's NASA confirming NASA. Some might say, what about other countries?
Excellent point. It's not just NASA. The Japanese Selene Lunar Orbiter, operating 2007 to 2009, captured 3D visualizations of the Apollo 15 landing site in 2008. They precisely match photos taken by the Apollo 15 crew back in 1971. Think about that. 37 years apart, 2 different space agencies, completely different equipment, independently confirming the exact location and features of the site.
That's pretty powerful.
Selene even detected something else, a subtle halo of disturbed lunar dust around the site, consistent with the LM's exhaust plume during its ascent. Further confirmation of the landing event itself.
And it goes beyond Japan, right?
Yeah.
Providing even more international verification.
Yes. India's Chandrayaan-1 spacecraft back in 2008 and China's Chang'e-2 spacecraft in 2010 both have independently spotted traces of the Apollo landing sites with their own high-resolution cameras. This is globally corroborated visual evidence from multiple independent space agencies.
Okay, so the sites are visible from orbit by multiple nations, but the moon rocks themselves, they remain the most tangible, direct proof that physical stuff was brought back.
Absolutely. The 382 kilograms of moon rocks brought back by Apollo are, well, irrefutable, tangible proof of human interaction with the lunar surface. And as we mentioned, these weren't kept secret. They were distributed to over 135 different countries, independent geological testing by countless academic institutions, research labs worldwide.
And the results?
Analyses conducted globally have consistently confirmed their unique lunar origin, distinct from Earth rocks, distinct from meteorites. Those unique geochemical traits, the lack of water alteration, the evidence of impacts on an airless body, all confirmed independently again and again.
And here's a hugely important point for cross-validation, something often overlooked. The Soviets brought back moon rocks, too.
Yes. The Soviet Union's uncrewed Luna program returned smaller quantities of moon rocks in the 1970s using robotic probes.
And how do they compare?
Those Soviet samples have been shared internationally, and critically, they match the exact characteristics of the Apollo moon rocks. Same unique features. This provides powerful, independent cross-validation from the very nation that was America's biggest rival in the space race. If the U.S. rocks were fakes from Arizona, the Soviet robotic samples would be glaringly different. But they aren't.
That seems like a huge piece of evidence against a hoax.
It really is.
And the laser-ranging retroreflectors, the LRRs we talked about, still operational up there.
Absolutely. Still working. The ones deployed by Apollo 11, 14, and 15 remain actively functional. Observatories on Earth, including many outside the U.S., routinely bounce lasers off these mirrors.
To precisely measure the moon's distance, continuous, real-time proof.
Continuous, verifiable proof that objects placed by humans are still there, still working. It's a literal, ongoing scientific experiment using Apollo hardware. It's worth noting, too, the Soviets also placed smaller retroreflectors with their Lunokhod rovers, allowing for comparative measurements, further reinforcing the data.
And finally, independent tracking. Not just NASA tracking the missions, but the rest of the world watching.
Exactly. Various independent groups and individuals worldwide, amateur astronomers with decent telescopes, professional observatories, universities, they successfully tracked the Apollo missions in real time, using their own radar, optical telescopes, recording the radio transmissions.
So they could confirm the flight paths.
They independently corroborated NASA's flight path data, the trajectory to the moon, key mission events like translunar injection, lunar orbit insertion. This section is paramount because it offers evidence from a multitude of sources entirely independent of NASA. It makes a global, coordinated hoax virtually impossible to conceal. The multifaceted, continuous international corroboration. It just makes a large-scale, long-term hoax logistically and politically unsustainable.
Which brings us neatly to maybe the most powerful argument against the hoax claims, the sheer, overwhelming implausibility of orchestrating such a massive, long-term deception.
This is a critical point, often gets lost when people focus on tiny, supposed anomalies. The sheer scale and complexity required to fake the moon landings, especially with 1960s tech. It presents an insurmountable hurdle for the hoax theory. Remember that number. Over 400,000 people involved in Apollo, across government agencies, dozens of contractors, universities.
Experts argue it would have been easier to just go.
Logistically, operationally, psychologically, yes. Easier to actually land on the moon than to orchestrate and maintain secrecy for such a vast conspiracy for over half a century.
I remember reading, a physicist even calculated it, estimated that for a conspiracy of that magnitude, involving that many people, statistically it would inevitably be exposed within just a few years.
Yeah.
Like 3.68 years was the estimate.
Well, it sounds about right. Due to human error, conscience, simple loose lips, the longer a secret is kept, the more people involved, the probability of exposure approaches certainty.
Dr. David McKay, a prominent NASA chief scientist, suggested faking it would have been harder than keeping the Manhattan Project secrets.
And that involved a much smaller, highly compartmentalized group working under intense wartime secrecy. This demonstrates that the hoax theory demands a level of conspiratorial perfection, coordination, silence that is far more fantastical, far harder to believe than the actual achievement of landing on the moon.
And then there's the undeniable geopolitical factor, the elephant in the room, the Soviet Union.
Right. Peak of the Cold War, intense rivalry, both superpowers constantly trying to one-up each other, constantly spying on each other.
The Soviets weren't just competitors. They were fierce ideological and technological adversaries. They had their own lunar program, advanced deep space tracking capabilities, a vast intelligence network.
If the U.S. landings were faked, the Soviets would have had an immense propaganda incentive, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to expose it, to humiliate their rival on the world stage. And they certainly had the technical means to detect inconsistencies or outright fraud.
But they didn't.
Instead, Soviet encyclopedias, official statements, scientific papers, they consistently reported the U.S. landings as factual. Furthermore, the USSR's own giant N-1 rocket, their Saturn V equivalent designed for crewed lunar missions, it failed all 4 launch attempts catastrophically. That underscores the extreme difficulty, the real-world challenges of actually achieving a lunar landing. Their own failures made the U.S. success seem more credible, perhaps.
The absence of a Soviet expose is arguably one of the most powerful geopolitical counterarguments to the hoax theory. They had the motive and the means, but they said nothing.
Exactly.
And what about the special effects? Couldn't they have faked it with 1960s tech? Maybe Kubrick was involved?
Film experts, special effects historians, optical scientists, they universally confirm the technology available in the 1960s was simply insufficient to convincingly fake the moon landing footage, especially the live broadcasts. Creating 143 minutes of slow-motion video, as seen in the Apollo 11 broadcast, that would have required impossible amounts of film storage for slow-motion cameras of the time, plus incredibly complex processing and editing just to make it look vaguely low gravity. Not to mention creating a believable, vast, detailed lunar environment with correct lighting.
And the quality of the footage.
The complete absence of typical film artifacts, splices, excessive grain, scratches in the broadcast footage further indicates it wasn't shot on conventional film in a studio, which would almost certainly show such imperfections, especially back then.
So the Stanley Kubrick idea, as compelling a story as it is, just not plausible, technically, even with his genius.
It's entirely debunked by film experts and historians. While Kubrick's 2001 achieved groundbreaking realism, it did so through collaboration with astronomical artists, aerospace engineers, meticulous miniature work, clever optical illusions like front projection.
Not by creating a photorealistic large-scale lunar set that could fool experts for decades.
Precisely. He was creating a stylized vision of the future, not trying to perfectly simulate lunar reality on a budget that would have rivaled Apollo itself. Furthermore, the observed behavior of the lunar dust in the footage.
Kicking up high, falling in arcs.
Rising high, settling quickly in that perfect parabolic trajectory that is perfectly consistent with a vacuum and lower gravity, an effect incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to achieve convincingly on a soundstage in the 1960s with wires or slow motion.
And crucially,
no heat waves. There are absolutely no shimmering heat waves visible in any of the Apollo footage, which would be undeniably present, unavoidable, if they were filming powerful spotlights on a dusty set, especially if trying to simulate the harsh lunar sun in, say, a desert location on Earth.
That's a subtle but very telling point.
It reinforces that the hoax narrative requires a suspension of disbelief, a belief in impossible technological feats of deception that is significantly greater than accepting the historical reality of the achievement.
Okay, so if the scientific and independent evidence overwhelmingly supports the authenticity of the Apollo missions, and we've laid out mountains of it now, why? Why do these moon landing conspiracy theories continue to endure? What keeps them alive, circulating despite such comprehensive debunking?
Their persistence is really fascinating. It's attributable to this complex interplay of socio-historical contexts and some deep-seated psychological factors that often have very little to do with the actual scientific evidence itself. We touched on this briefly earlier, but it's worth exploring more deeply. The initial proliferation of these theories in the mid-1970s wasn't random. It was very much a product of its time.
It directly coincided with that period of profound public distrust in government institutions in the U.S., a real crisis of confidence.
Exactly. That era was marked by those significant revelations that truly shook the nation's faith in its leaders. First, the Pentagon Papers in '71 exposed systematic deception about Vietnam. The public had been lied to.
Then Watergate, 72 to 74, leading to Nixon resigning. It just shattered public confidence in official narratives and the integrity of the presidency.
This period really saw a seismic shift in the nature of conspiracy thinking in America, didn't it?
How so?
From focusing on external enemies, communists, shadowy foreign groups, to this growing, pervasive suspicion that the American state itself, its own government, was actively conspiring against its own citizens.
A deep internal distrust.
Precisely. And into this fertile ground of skepticism and disillusionment comes Bill Kaysing's 1976 book, We Never Went to the Moon. His claims of inside knowledge, even though his direct involvement was limited, provided that seemingly credible narrative template. It resonated deeply with the distrustful public.
And then popular media took it mainstream. The Fox special in 2001, Capricorn 1 back in '78, blurring the lines between fiction and perceived reality for many audiences.
It absolutely did. Took the theory from the fringes into much wider discussion. So the timing of the conspiracy theory's emergence, it directly correlates with that period of profound disillusionment.
It really shows that belief in the moon landing hoax isn't solely driven by a critical analysis of scientific data, is it? It's often fueled by a pre-existing cultural predisposition to distrust official narratives, a sort of default skepticism towards authority.
It absolutely highlights how a compelling narrative, even one utterly unsubstantiated by facts, can flourish and take root when public trust is low. Understanding this is crucial for comprehending why these theories persist, even facing overwhelming verifiable evidence. They tap into deeper societal anxieties about truth, power, and authority.
Beyond the historical context, psychological factors play a massive role too, right? In the enduring nature of these theories. It's about how our brains work, how we process information, and maybe what psychological needs these beliefs fulfill.
Indeed. One of the primary mechanisms at play is confirmation bias, a well-documented cognitive bias.
Where we look for things that confirm what we already think.
Exactly. Individuals selectively focus on information that supports their existing beliefs, while actively disregarding, downplaying, or reinterpreting contradictory evidence. This explains why many conspiracy theorists continue to argue against NASA's extensive evidence, focusing instead on their own interpretations of selective anomalies. It's like building a wall of perceived evidence around an already established belief.
Wearing a filter that only lets in what you agree with makes it almost impossible for new, contradictory facts to get through.
Yes. And psychologically, believing in a conspiracy theory can offer a strong sense of specialness or unique privileged knowledge.
Like you're in the know.
It gives the believer a feeling of being in on a secret, seeing through the veil that others are fooled by. That provides a powerful psychological reward. It can also foster an us versus them mentality. Believers form a distinct social identity, reinforcing their convictions, creating a sense of belonging among like-minded individuals.
Is there a link to anxiety? I've heard that suggested.
There is research suggesting a positive correlation between feelings of anxiety and a propensity to endorse conspiracy theories, almost as a coping mechanism.
How so?
When people feel anxious or powerless facing complex, confusing world events, conspiracy theories can offer a seemingly simple explanation. They provide a sense of order and control, assigning blame or identifying hidden actors where none seems to exist otherwise.
And conspiracy theorists often see themselves as detectives.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. They often meticulously reinterpret publicly available visual evidence, adhering to that seeing is believing idea, feeling that anyone can act as a detective to uncover hidden inconsistencies in the official record. This whole dynamic explains the internal mechanisms that sustain belief in the hoax, even when external evidence is overwhelming. Confirmation bias, the psychological benefits, the desire for control, they all conspire to make these beliefs remarkably resistant to purely factual arguments.
It creates a kind of self-perpetuating cycle. The belief becomes deeply intertwined with your identity, your social group, making it incredibly difficult to dislodge just with facts. Helps explain the stickiness of these theories. Finally, let's look at some key proponents and their influence. It's not just abstract ideas. Specific people and cultural phenomena have kept these theories alive and amplified them.
Bill Kaysing is undeniably foundational. Former Navy officer, technical writer for a rocket engine manufacturer that contributed to Apollo. His claims of inside knowledge, that background, lent a false sense of credibility to his 1976 book. His narrative provided a seemingly credible origin story for the hoax theory for many people.
And, of course, Stanley Kubrick. That persistent, though entirely fabricated theory that he secretly faked the footage.
Even though it came from a mockumentary, Dark Side of the Moon, which explicitly stated it was satire, the idea persists. It demonstrates how compelling fictional connections can embed themselves deeply in public consciousness.
It highlights that the persistence isn't solely based on scientific arguments or alleged evidence, but also on cultural resonance, the perceived credibility of proponents, how media amplifies it.
Absolutely. A good story, even a fake one, can be incredibly sticky, especially if it taps into existing distrust or seems to involve famous figures.
And it's not just fringe figures or satirists. Some public figures with significant platforms have also expressed doubts. inadvertently or intentionally amplifying these theories to much broader audiences.
Yes, includes individuals like former MLB player Carl Everett, who famously didn't believe. Comedian Joe Rogan has discussed the theories on his huge podcast. Actress Whoopi Goldberg has expressed skepticism on TV. Even groups like the Flat Earth Society accuse NASA of faking the landings, tying it into their own narrative. These endorsements, regardless of their factual basis, give the theories a wider reach, more legitimacy in some eyes.
And beyond direct advocacy, popular culture itself engages with the theory, sometimes blurring the lines. We mentioned Capricorn 1.
Also, its appearance in video games like Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, which playfully includes a faked moon landing movie set, or even satirical articles, memes that sometimes get mistakenly reported as actual news by less discerning outlets or shared widely without context.
These cultural touchpoints keep the narrative circulating, ensure its continued presence in public discourse, regardless of factual accuracy. They make the idea familiar, even if presented as outlandish, which can sometimes be enough to plant that seed of doubt. #outro. We've taken a truly comprehensive deep dive today into one of those incredible human achievements, one of the most persistent, fascinating conspiracy theories surrounding it. We've meticulously laid out the arguments, the evidence, the counter-evidence from all sides of this fake or real debate.
On the one hand, we have this overwhelming body of evidence supporting the authenticity of the Apollo moon landings. That includes the direct mission data, the sheer scale of the Apollo program, the logistical implausibility of faking it with over 400,000 people involved.
Then there's the extensive scientific analysis. Hundreds of kilograms of unique lunar samples, still yielding new discoveries. Their unique properties are irrefutable, confirmed globally.
And let's not forget the ongoing functionality of those human-deployed laser-ranging reflectors. Still up there, still working, allowing continuous Earth-based measurements, real-time interaction with Apollo hardware on the moon.
Plus, crucially, that independent international verification. Multiple space agencies, Japan, India, China, their orbiters taking pictures, confirming the landing sites, the equipment, the tracks are all still there.
And, of course, the logistical implausibility of faking it with 1960s special effects. The tech just didn't exist to produce convincing, artifact-free footage like that. And maybe most compellingly, the complete silence from the Soviet Union. No expose from a fierce Cold War adversary that had every reason and the means to cry foul if it were fake. That stands as a powerful geopolitical counter-argument.
On the other hand, the various moon landing hoax claims, while persistent, often visually compelling at first glance, they're consistently based on misunderstandings of basic physics in a vacuum, principles of photography, optics, crucial satirical context.
Each alleged anomaly, from the waving flag to the missing stars, the lack of a big blast crater, every single one has been thoroughly scientifically debunked, often through simple demonstrations or clear explanations based on known science.
So ultimately, the endurance of these theories, despite the overwhelming and verifiable facts, it seems more attributable to those deeper societal factors we discussed.
Rooted in historical distrust in government, especially from the mid-70s onwards. And those powerful psychological mechanisms, confirmation bias, the appeal of secret knowledge, the need for simple explanations in a complex world. This really highlights why such a discrepancy exists between verifiable fact and enduring belief.
We've laid out the arguments and the evidence from all sides. Our goal was to empower you with the knowledge to make an informed decision. Now, it's really for you to weigh these facts, apply critical thinking, and draw your own conclusions from this truly fascinating intersection of science, history, human ambition, and the psychology of belief.
So, maybe the final thought is this. What does the enduring power of these deeply ingrained narratives, even when they fly in the face of overwhelming, continuously verifiable facts, what does that tell us about the nature of truth? About authority, about human perception itself, especially in today's age of information overload?
And maybe how can we apply this critical lens to other complex topics that shape our understanding of the world to ensure we're separating the factual from the merely compelling or the emotionally resonant?